The sky cracks open with rage, revealing the spires of the tower that has become a silent witness to the greatest fall in the Empire's history. Once those touches brought warmth, but now every gesture carries only cold calculation and inevitability. The blue dress flows like a frozen sea, hiding the trembling of the one whose fate was sealed long before dawn. Cold metal bites into her skin, equating noble blood with the filth of the prison floor in silent anticipation of the verdict. There is no longer any plea in her gaze, only a violet flame of resolve, burning away the last remnants of former attachment and pain. The chasm between them widens, and the sparks of past loyalty fade, turning to ash on the altar of someone else's ambitions. A silent scream freezes in his eyes, begging for mercy that this night is no longer able to grant. The shadow of the past settles heavily on her shoulders, while the crimson sunset paints her path in the colors of spilled blood. Among innocent rose petals, she appears as a perfect statue, whose beauty has become her most exquisite curse. Her heart beats against her ribs like a trapped bird that has realized the golden cage of lies has finally snapped shut. A poisonous whisper creeps into her mind, poisoning the last crumbs of hope that still smoldered in her wounded soul. Faceless shadows pass judgment, unaware that behind this humble posture rages a storm capable of destroying their entire world. Light no longer offers salvation. It only illuminates more brightly the abyss she is ready to step into for the sake of long-awaited vengeance. Her heart beats against her ribs like a trapped bird that has realized the golden cage of lies has finally snapped shut. A poisonous whisper creeps into her mind, poisoning the last crumbs of hope that still smoldered in her wounded soul. Faceless shadows pass judgment, unaware that behind this humble posture rages a storm capable of destroying their entire world. Light no longer offers salvation. It only illuminates more brightly the abyss she is ready to step into for the sake of long-awaited vengeance. His triumph seeps through false care, turning every tender word into sharp steel that strikes without missing. The silent executor of another's will only tightens the links, cutting off the last chance for escape or forgiveness. In his brown eyes, there is not rage, but a quiet sorrow for the one who has made her final and bitter choice. The softness of his features gives way to marble hardness as his heart finally turns into an impregnable fortress, closed to everyone. Ancient magic awakens in the hands of the one who was meant to uphold the law, but now merely carries out the tyrant's will. In the silence of the cabinet, a conspiracy is ripening, where the fates of living people are nothing more than pawns on a blood-soaked chessboard. The last spark of compassion dies in his gaze, giving way to the cold gleam of power that knows no boundaries or mercy. An ancient curse weaves their souls into a tight knot, where loyalty borders on madness and love borders on eternal damnation. The magical contract binds this union more securely than any words, leaving an invisible, burning mark of the sin committed on their skin. In the silence of the empty room, she sorts through the shards of the past, wondering if her role in this game was dictated by her heart. Every rustle in the corridor makes her freeze, for in this castle, even the shadows know how to betray their masters. Steel armor gleams in the rays of the setting sun, announcing the arrival of the one who will become her only chance of salvation. She looks at her wrists, still feeling the weight of the chains that no longer bind her flesh but hold her soul. The path to freedom lies through the cold labyrinths of memory, where every step may be the last in this mad chase. The magical artifact pulses in her palms, responding to the call of blood and promising power capable of turning back time. Reality crumbles into a flurry of book pages, dragging her into the abyss where the end of the story has yet to be written anew. Before those who fancied themselves her judges, she lowers her head, hiding behind humility a plan for future vengeance. Surrounded by predators, she blooms among thorns, turning her weakness into the deadliest weapon this world has ever known. The past is no more. She rises from the ashes of her defeats to live this life on her own ruthless terms. Ancient blood answers the pain, igniting an otherworldly fire in her eyes that will burn away everything sacred in her path. Energy pulses, obeying the will of the one who no longer fears the darkness, because she has become the darkness itself. Surrounded by bloody shadows, she looks like a fallen angel, ready to bring down the heavens for a single moment of truth. The last moment of closeness before the storm, when words are unnecessary and a farewell glance says more than 1,000 vows. Cruel reality bursts in with the ringing of steel, reminding everyone that in this game, compassion is an unforgivable luxury. Even through the gag and pain, he silently swears, if death is inevitable, he will meet it without looking away from his queen. Bare feet touch the stone, leaving behind a trail of shattered hopes and cold, ice-like indifference. He walks into the shining unknown, leaving her alone in a world where there is no longer room for love or forgiveness. Her face freezes into a mask of indifference, hiding the scars on her soul that will never heal under the light of the new moon. The ending has become only the beginning. She accepts her fate, knowing that from now on, she alone will dictate the rules of this game. Every step leaves a crimson trail on the stone, while the echoes of past hopes finally fade away in the labyrinths of this cursed castle. Steel sings its mournful song, proclaiming the end of the era of mercy and the beginning of a reign born from betrayal and fury. The masks are dropped. The one who swore to protect now tries on the crown of a tyrant, forever writing his name into history as the Empire's greatest nightmare. In the twilight of the dungeons, her palm offers the last comfort while time inexorably counts down the seconds to their final parting. Iron chills the skin, but the cold inside is far more terrifying. It is the realization that salvation has become the most exquisite form of torture. Magic flows through her fingers, weaving a new reality where old debts will be paid in full and enemies will choke on their own bile. In this clash of gazes, there is no room for compromise, only icy determination to destroy what was once dear to them. She is no longer a victim of circumstances. Before us stands a queen whose throne will be built upon the bones of those who dared betray her. A serpentine smile of triumph plays on his lips, certain that in this game all the aces belong to him alone, but the wild snarl of a beast cornered in a trap foretells only one thing. The hunter and the prey are about to switch places. A hand clutches the collar, as if trying to hold on to slipping trust, while an abyss of unsaid words opens up between them. From the deep shadows, the one whose treacherous schemes have finally taken shape watches, poisoning the air with the premonition of inevitable disaster. Ancient magic awakens in the veins, wrapping the skin in a poisonous glow that marks the end of humanity and the birth of something sinister. Rage bursts outward along with the crimson flame in her eyes, burning away the last remnants of reason in favor of a primal, untamable thirst for revenge. The icy indifference in the blonde man's gaze cuts deeper than any sword, confirming that in this game, mercy has long been recognized as weakness and forgotten. His body refuses to obey, pinned to the cold stone by the weight of defeat, while the enemy's triumph becomes tangible and bitterly sharp on the tongue. Every movement is saturated with the poison of superiority. He savors another's agony like the most precious wine from the cellars of the conquered empire. He leaves without looking back, leaving behind only the ruins of former ideals and a long shadow in which the defeated will have to suffocate. The final glance, full of diabolical delight, puts the final period. This world now belongs to him, and there will be no more mercy. The conspirators multiply their whispers in the emptiness of the halls, where every word can become a death sentence for those who still believe in justice. She stands frozen in a strip of ghostly light, like a vision whose fragility is deceptive, and every movement is saturated with hidden, primal power. In her violet eyes there is no longer any fear, only an endless winter frost, capable of freezing the heart of even the most furious tyrant of the empire. Her steps are almost weightless, but for him they sound like the tolling of a bell, announcing the beginning of a new chapter in their shared curse. Deprived of the right to speak, he can only beg for mercy with his eyes or curse the one whose tenderness now seems like a sophisticated mockery. Even behind the mask of cold majesty, confusion sometimes slips through, reminding that once this ruthless queen was simply a frightened child. A sharp gesture tears through the silence, putting the final point in the argument. Power is not only a crown, but also the right to inflict unbearable pain. The pain sobers him, forcing him to realize the bitter truth. The one he considered his salvation has become his most devoted executioner. In the rays of the setting sun, their shadows intertwine, but their souls drift further apart, lost in the labyrinth of eternal betrayal and lies. She approaches, carrying with her the scent of cold ash, while he vainly tries to find even a spark of former warmth in her eyes. Slender fingers caress his cheek, turning captivity into an intimate dance where the boundaries between compassion and complete submission are finally erased. Cruel tenderness forces him to submit. This gesture strips away the last crumbs of will, binding him tighter than any iron chains or magical spells. The distance between them vanishes, leaving only a ringing pulse and the realization. She sees right through him, down to his most wounded, trembling soul. In the crimson whirlpool of his eyes, helpless fury boils, crashing against the icy calm of her gaze like a wave against unyielding cliffs. She steps back, but the invisible thread of control stretches to its limit, turning his existence into an eternal wait for her next command. Every word of hers is a riddle thrown in the face of the defeated, forcing him to doubt reality and his own memory of who the enemy truly is. A cold whisper penetrates under the skin, burning there the brand of a new loyalty from which not even death can save him in this God-forsaken place. She disappears into the twilight, leaving him alone with the silence that now screams only one thing: there is no way back. A gaze clouded with pain fixes on only one goal, while a single question pulses in his mind. One that has no answer. Her figure seems like a ghost in this cold haze, a fleeting reminder of the life that was destroyed by one fateful decision. Dangerous closeness clouds the mind, turning the interrogation into an intimate confession where every breath is worth its weight in gold and blood. Crimson splashes on the cold stone silently scream about the price that had to be paid for a truth more terrible than any fiction. She watches his torment with divine detachment, like a sculptor observing how his creation slowly crumbles into dust. Time has frozen in this dungeon, stitching their fates together with strong threads of hatred that, with every second, looks more and more like love. The last desperate surge, an attempt to look into her soul, hidden behind a mask of ice, and find at least a drop of remorse there. But her violet gaze remains impenetrable, reflecting only his own weakness and the inevitability of the ending she has long foretold. Resistance is useless. He lowers his head, accepting his fate from the hands of the one who has become his personal hell and his only salvation. Darkness thickens between them, turning a chance encounter into a fatal duel where every word strikes without mercy. His whisper creeps into her mind, poisoning the peace and making her heart beat to the rhythm of inevitable catastrophe. He embodies the curse itself, its ghostly trail stretching from the past and offering no chance of redemption. The oppressive silence of the walls presses down on their shoulders as they search for answers in the depths of each other's frighteningly close eyes. Sorrow has frozen in her features, but her will remains unshakable, like a blade tempered in the flames of endless losses. The air crackles with mutual hostility that chains their souls together, allowing neither of them to take a single step back. The fragile barrier of words collapses, exposing the bleeding wounds they had so carefully hidden from each other. A cold realization pierces the mind. There is no salvation, and the only path leads straight into the embrace of gentle madness. The last thread of trust snaps with a quiet ring, leaving behind only emptiness and the echo of unspoken words. She walks away, leaving behind only a trail of unvoiced grievances and the bitter taste of an ending that cannot be changed. There is no longer any warmth in her gaze, only the cold glow of the abyss that devours the last remnants of his hope for forgiveness. Loneliness wraps around him like a heavy shroud, while the shadows of the past mercilessly erase the image of the one who had been his entire world. Footsteps echo loudly in the emptiness, counting down the moments until their paths diverge forever. The closeness of their bodies only emphasizes the chasm between their souls, which not even the most desperate plea can bridge. He catches every movement of hers, trying to find in that icy mask at least a shadow of the former tenderness. Indifference has frozen in her gestures, turning the once living spark into lifeless marble that knows no pity. A dull pain pierces his heart as he realizes. For her, this union had become just another bargaining chip. The idyll around them seems like a mockery, for inside each of them rages a storm threatening to destroy everything alive. One touch, fleeting and fragile, stuns more than a scream, returning the forgotten feeling of safety to this cold world. He allows himself a moment of weakness, to believe, if only for an instant, that the light in her eyes is meant for him alone. The night silence gently guards their shared secret, weaving shadows into a whimsical pattern of hope that is never meant to come true. The search for truth turns into torture when the pages of the past begin to bleed, revealing details that should have been left forgotten. A sudden insight pierces his mind like an icy wind, sweeping away the last remnants of doubt and making his heart race with frantic alarm. He sees their fragile truce crumbling, and darkness once again floods the space, erasing the barely formed connection. The harsh intrusion of reality shatters the illusion of safety, replacing whispers of tenderness with sharp commands and the ringing of cold metal. Another's will rudely dictates its own rules, tearing her from the arms of the one who had become too dear in this time. The last gesture of despair, a silent plea for help, freezes at her fingertips before they are separated forever. Anger boils in his veins, and this anger only tightens the walls of the dungeon around the girl frozen under the weight of accusations. In this suffocating darkness, their thoughts stitch themselves together as one. Now she is ready to accept her fate, still unaware that the path leads to ruin. For any hope collapses when harsh reality mercilessly invades their fragile world. Footsteps echo loudly in the emptiness, counting down the moments until her complete solitude. The cold of the corridors wraps around her shoulders, but even in this grief, she finds the strength to take the first step into the unknown, where separation has already drawn an invisible line. Yet beyond that line, his gaze flares. He will not surrender her to the darkness. Feeling this, she catches a glimpse of change. And now, in the silence of the dungeon, a plan is born that will forever change the rules of this cruel game. The darkness in his gaze becomes tangible. It thickens as a ghostly figure appears in the doorway, one that can either save him or destroy him. Time freezes, turning their meeting into inevitability. Only the trembling flame of the candle in her hands reveals the fragility of the moment in the face of danger. In this light, he accepts her as a gift. For now, the masks are torn away, and only pure truth will decide who walks out of this battle alive. And in her pupils, an ancient power is already awakening, ready to claim its bloody harvest. Footsteps sound like a verdict on the past. She freezes, catching this rhythm with a heart that beats louder than any sobs. The cold of the stone burns her bare skin, but this pain is nothing compared to the tension as the distance between them shrinks to its limit. A silent plea freezes in her gaze, and he answers it, becoming a protective shadow ready to take the blow of the coming storm. The last tear puts a final period on their former life, opening the way for a steel resolve that no torture can break. In the rays of the setting sun, their silhouettes finally merge into one, marking the beginning of the end of their agonizing path to truth. Golden rays of the setting sun enveloped their figures, creating an illusion of warmth in this frighteningly cold and quiet moment of confession. Her gaze darted about, unable to hide the sudden anxiety. It seemed as if even breathing had stopped when she tried to comprehend the weight of the words thrown in her face. Her thoughts tangled, leaving behind only a bitter aftertaste. He looked at her as though the entire world around them had ceased to exist, demanding an answer here and now. But the intimacy of the moment was mercilessly shattered by the heavy footsteps of the one who had come to take her away from this dream. The stranger's sharp voice sliced through the silence like a steel blade. Fear instantly displaced every other emotion, making her heart beat in a frantic rhythm. A blinding surge of magic rushed forward, causing the space to vibrate with uncontrollable power that demanded immediate and unquestioning obedience. She instinctively shrank back, trying to shield herself from this blinding fury. A man's palm settled on her shoulder, becoming the only support in this chaos. Anger boiled inside him, poisoning the air around them. In her eyes reflected only his face, distorted by rage, and this moment seemed endless, like the calm before the real storm. The knight merely snorted contemptuously, not considering his opponent worthy of attention. A sharp yank made her cry out as he forcefully tried to drag her away from the growing danger. Heavy footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. He did not turn around, gripping her wrist with such force that her skin began to pale. The fabric of her dress rustled plaintively across the cold tiles of the old castle. Every movement of his was saturated with dark energy, promising swift retribution to anyone who dared stand in their way. She could barely keep up with him, gasping for air and no longer recognizing the man she had loved. Now there was nothing human left in his gaze. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream, leaving her in utter solitude. Once inside the four walls, the heavy silence became almost tangible, squeezing her chest tighter than any shackles. The tips of her fingers still held the phantom warmth of his lips, forcing her to replay that insane moment over and over in her mind. Conversation refused to flow, and every new word only widened the chasm that had opened between them that night. His calmness frightened her far more than open rage. Outside the window, twilight thickened, foretelling a storm that would forever change their familiar world. A lone torch flame trembled, casting long, bizarre shadows across her pale face, full of silent questions. She took a step forward, hoping to find answers in the coming dawn. He watched her with a gaze that mixed unspoken pleading and the awareness that they would never be the same again. The castle walls seemed to close in around them, forcing them to confront the truth they had been running from for so long. Words stuck in her throat, turning into a bitter lump. She waited for any sign, any spark of former tenderness, but met only a cold, impenetrable wall. In this silent confrontation, their fate was being decided while time inexorably counted down the final seconds until the masks would be completely removed. A sudden realization pierced her thoughts, making her freeze with horror. His hot breath touched her skin, and his quiet whisper sounded like a death sentence to all her hopes. She tried to push him away, but her body treacherously refused to obey the will of reason. Guilt crashed over her completely, depriving her of the ability to think clearly or find a way out of the trap. His patience was running out, and this cold detachment hurt worse than a knife. Inside her, a little girl begged for salvation. The barrier between them became almost physical, turning once close people into random, hostile strangers. A scream tore from her lips before she could suppress it, shattering the corridor's silence into tiny, sharp shards. He spun around sharply, and in that movement lurked a hidden, predatory threat. Two worlds, two truths collided in a final battle of gazes, where the winner would receive nothing but ashes and regret. The light at the end of the path both beckoned and terrified, promising freedom at a price they were not ready to pay. Locked behind cold bars, she was left alone with the darkness. Heavy drops of blood spattered the floor, becoming silent witnesses to the sacrifice he had made. Past mistakes haunted her, surrounding her with a crowd of voiceless shadows whose whispers could not be silenced even in sleep. There was no longer any life in his gaze, only endless, soul-burning exhaustion. The ground slipped from under her feet, leaving only emptiness. She realized that all this pain was merely the price for a fleeting moment of false happiness. She stood on the edge of the abyss of her own despair. They were separated not by meters, but by thousands of unspoken words and harbored grudges. She wanted to memorize every feature of his face before reality finally erased this image from her wounded heart. Even at the very end, he continued to be her shield, hiding her from the cruel world. Their fingers intertwined in one last, desperate attempt to hold on. That smile was the most painful farewell she had ever witnessed in her life. The light swallowed him, carrying away the last hope of salvation. Returning to reality, she understood. The rules of the game had changed forever, and there was no way back. Now her fate belonged only to her. Deep in her eyes, a flame flared up that no one would ever be able to extinguish. The cold of the stone burned, reminding her that she was still alive. Every step was difficult, but she continued forward, never looking back at the past left behind. Looking down at the one who had sacrificed everything for her, she finally found that bitter strength she had sought for so long. The end of this chapter became only the beginning of her true rebirth.